Kevin Zimmerman wrote a story on ArizonaSports.com. In fact, he's written many stories on ArizonaSports.com, but we're going to focus on this one right now, talking about the fourth quarters, by the numbers, what's up with the Phoenix Suns' ragged fourth quarters. And I guess let's just start here, Kevin. It feels like the fourth quarter has been a borderline disaster for the Suns this season. Do the numbers bear that out?
Oh, yes, they do, Luke.
Good.
I won't go into the pure numbers and getting into that too much. That would be boring. And I honestly am looking at my story and I don't remember half the numbers. But
there were a lot of numbers, but it's also the names that are involved.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway for me is okay, you're bad in the fourth quarter. We can see it with our eyes. We don't need the numbers necessarily, but you're also really good in the second quarter, the third quarters. And I think when you look at kind of the net ratings, which are basically points allowed and points scored per 100 possessions, when you break it down by player, obviously lineups matter and those numbers are skewed. Kevin Durant's are super poor, but that's because Kevin Durant early on in the season was playing a lot without Book and Beal. So those are skewed. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, look, the big three are going to get there. It's just a matter of who's there to join them and what matchups work. And I think one big takeaway as far as people is Nurkic's numbers are actually really good. And that's interesting considering we've seen them kind of go away from him in the fourth quarters for, I think, offensive and defensive reasons. But that's going to be an interesting thing that kind of comes out of this, too.
Yeah, Basin Earnings, you gotta go check this article out. It is unbelievable. It truly is on ArizonaSports.com. Kevin Zimmerman, of course, wrote this thing. The level of detail is ridiculous. It does document, to me, the problem with the Suns from many different angles right now. But as you were involved in all these numbers and this detail right here, what was the biggest surprise? Was there a surprise that you maybe you didn't really think about going and starting to research these numbers? What was the biggest surprise?
Honestly, it is the Nurk thing. That there's enough data and sample size where you'd say, okay, people we talk about, he might get played off the floor in some points, but offensively and defensively, he's pretty solid. It's going to be matchup based, and they're obviously just tinkering with things to tinker. Yeah. I think right now, but yeah, if you ask why they're struggling in the fourth quarter, it still doesn't answer that because it's it's bad defense. The defense is pretty bad. The offense is even worse.
Yeah, but the offense being worse, that to me was the biggest surprise when I was sitting there reading I was like, what?
And it doesn't make sense, again, because it's tied to the defense, and then the pace is slow because of all things. So it's all interconnected, and you really don't know the why behind it because, again, you see the second and third quarter numbers, and you watch this team play, and they're very functional and very good at other points. So that's my big takeaway. Is I still don't know why, but it is a thing. We're halfway through the season. It's a thing.
It is a thing. Kevin Zimmerman's joining us. Now, you mentioned KD, and you mentioned how his numbers are bad, but that's also partially because he was playing a lot of these fourth quarters without Booker or Beal early in the season. Can you completely write it off because of that, or do you read something into that? I know a lot of people have sort of made the connection that maybe he's wearing down by the end of these games, or are you not concerned with that?
I'm not concerned. Even his pure shooting numbers are actually pretty good. They're good all the time this whole season. Bradley Beal's numbers are not there, so it is okay, I don't think Bradley Beal's going to shoot, 35% or whatever in fourth quarters for an entire season. You think these things start averaging out. They're going to start figuring things out once they play more together, and this might be just an afterthought by the time we get to April and that kind of thing. So, yeah, the big three numbers, too, you just look at those in the fourth quarter. They're pretty neutral, fine, and so you just say, okay, they have a lot to work out, but it's not doom and gloom like the net rating of -19 for fourth quarters this whole season is not good, but that's obviously a couple bad minutes here, a couple bad minutes there have just tailspinned on them, and it's just cut that out, and then this number will be much more reasonable to look at, I think.
As you all know, crunch time, of course, by definition in the NBA is 5-point game in the last 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. What did you find in regard to crunch time in these numbers?
I didn't go super deep into it, but they're not terrible. They're much more when they're in close games and they don't like give up 15 points in a row to get into a bad spot where there's no clutch time, then the clutch time numbers are, again, not super terrible. They're reasonable. And then when you look at KD and Book, and just when you get to the playoffs and their shot making ability, and Beal too, you would think that they're going to figure it out. So yeah, I mean, we're at the part where I say this team is the 3 best players are too good to not figure it out. I think we're there when we talk about clutch time, and it's not as bad as just the entire fourth quarter. Because if we just go back in our memory banks, it's usually like the 9-minute mark, the 10-minute mark, where things just go south, and it's like, here we go again. Yeah.
Yeah, even the other night when they won, it was like, here we go again.
Yeah.
Kevin Zimmerman's joining us. Kevin, you point out the role turnovers are playing in all of this, and I think it's easy for people to make the jump and say, well, they don't have really a lot of point guards on this team. It doesn't sound like they're going to add a point guard either, unless I missed something in the last couple of days. Is the turnover thing something they may just have to live with to a certain extent, but they can maybe outscore teams, or is there still a way to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. That's probably beyond me. But I think the Orlando game was a really good example of they come in so many different ways, and they lead to such bad things. Like the Orlando game, I think at one point I looked in the third or fourth quarter, probably third actually, before it got really bad, and they're shooting pushing 60%. Their defense is close to 40%. The Magic weren't shooting great, and it's like a 5-point game. And it's just like, why is that? Well, it's the turnovers and the offensive rebounds given up. And just those little things, again, you can look at it and just say, that's just stuff that you can fix, and it's not really roster related. It's not related to point guard stuff. It might be overthinking, and why they're still struggling in some moments to learn, okay, once our offense gets bogged down, what do we do? I think that's a learning curve for sure, but I just think that stuff's if they're going to be a good team, I don't think point guard or not, you're going to deal with that. So I think that's fixable is what I'm trying to say.
You know what was amazing about it? Frank Vogel just the other day actually referenced the fact that they might be more mental in the fourth quarter. And I know you know that, Zim, right now. But do you think that? Do you buy into that? Do you think it's in their heads, not only individually, but collectively?
Yeah, it might be at this point. I mean, you kind of see it coming, and if we're sitting at home on our couch and can say, okay, even the Heat game when they have they were up 20 or whatever going into the fourth, and you say, okay, let's not make it one of those nights, and even a couple of possessions in when we say, here it goes, I'm sure they're thinking that. I mean, you probably know, being a pro athlete, if you've been in this before, but they leveled out at some point. It wasn't as bad, and I think they just need to get over a mental hurdle of maybe, all right, this is how we handle it. We've done this enough. I'm tired of it, but this is how we fix it. Is, again, maybe not having a point guard hurts them in that respect, and not having a calming presence. But I think Book and Katie will learn to do that, and that's something Book hasn't necessarily done a lot of, having not been a point guard all the time on good teams too.
One of the things that's so weird about this, and you alluded to it earlier, they're so good in the second and third quarters that it's not like if they were just bad in every quarter, you'd be like, and they're a little bit worse in the fourth. All right, this team has problems, but they're so good in the second and third. Is that making the fourth quarter look worse to us, or is there really that much of a drop off?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers say there's a drop off, because I think I did right. They're net ratings, they're second and third, or third and fourth in the second and thirds. So they're top 5 for 2 quarters.
Fourth in the second, third in the third.
The first quarters have been a little rougher, and so that just tells me they are playing some game of we know when we can turn it on, and we know we can turn it on. It's just a matter of, again, leveling it out where you don't get behind by 20. If you fall behind by 12, that's fine. You'll survive. You don't panic. But 20 is too much. And then, just the start of the fourth have been the bad part, I think. That's where it really has been condensed into the bad.
Do you think they're going to fix it?
I think they will.
They're going to be able to fix it?
I think for them, I think we're going to get to a point, again, I think it's going to take time, but they're going to get to a point where we will talk about the point guard stuff, and we will talk about the basketball schematic things over just I don't understand why this is happening. I think it's coming, and I think we're seeing it slowly get there.
All right, look at that.
Look at me. Yeah.
A message of hope on the way out the door.
It's beautiful.
Kevin, great story. I would encourage everybody to go check it out.
Yes.
It's not super long, but it does. It's like in school when you had to show your work to back up your what your argument was. He does right here.
A lot of numbers, but also a lot of names, and good names, good research. Well
Thanks.
done.
Appreciate it.
Kevin, thanks for stopping by, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we're gonna laugh at Kellen next time he walks in here with a hoodie on.
Yeah, killer.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.